did you land a job at Booking.com?
Overrated.
Whoa. Your journey from architecture to UX design.
Discard my Asian trait.
I will guess about what do they understand about design thinking. Is it real or fake?
How do you convince them to do that? Because I assume like, would you recommend Malaysian designer migrating to another country?
Hello, Happy New Year guys. Welcome to the Design Thinking Club podcast. I hope everyone is refreshed and energized to come to the new year. We have a very special guest today.
Yeah. I know you've been excited to have him on the podcast since the beginning.
Yes. He was supposed to be our first guest, but he was actually not located in Malaysia. He was located in Amsterdam. So it was a bit hard to get a hold of him. But I'm very happy to have him on board today. So I would like to welcome Syith.
Thank you.
A brief introduction, I guess, about Syith. So I used to work with Syith last time at Superhands. We were working on some AI machine learning features, a product for the company. But I think Syith stayed there for around 1 year and then he left to migrate to Amsterdam to join Booking.com. So I just realized that Syith have been working at Booking.com for 7 years, which is quite amazing. And we're going to touch a bit on his journey from architecture to becoming a product designer, touch a bit on how he migrated from Malaysia to Amsterdam. And also, I wish we can learn a bit more about being a designer at Booking.
Yeah, I think I know you last time from by aim of somebody else. But yeah, when I heard about that transition from architecture to product design, I was like, oh, very interesting. Because we also know another person, like Zaki.
Zaki, yeah.
He was from architecture as well?
He was in art and design, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that transition, I think, like, although it's still like an art-related stuff, but it's still very, very, very different discipline, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I want to learn more about that as well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of designers out there who come from architecture and wanted to migrate to UX design or UI design as well. A lot of them find it interesting, and actually a lot of them ask me as well, like, hey, how can I become a product designer? And they're coming from architecture. Okay, Syith, maybe you can share on your journey from architecture to UX design.
Yeah, so I graduated from architecture, but I think I didn't get to practice. So I took I think maybe a year or 2 years just exploring like different art and design fields. So I did a couple of things. I did like publication, I did some art installation, but then I somehow gravitated towards like digital design. And I think during one of those events that we had back then, it was, if I remember correctly, it was at VLT Lab.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. So that was the career defining moment for me. Like, just being introduced into like what UX design is capable of. And I think for me, like I think I shared this with you before. Why I transitioned from architecture to UX is because of the turnover rate.
Oh.
Yeah, for design, because it's
faster.
Yeah, it's faster, and it's actually, it makes you feel a lot better just to see your design like being out there as quick as possible. So architecture has I guess longer turnover rate.
You cannot really iterate right? Once it's built.
Yeah.
It's too late to
exactly. Yeah, it'll take years.
Yeah.
Like I don't have that kind of patience. So yeah.
Right. So you didn't get a chance to practice architecture at all after your uni days?
Not formally, no.
Right, okay.
I mean, there are some projects here and there, but it wasn't like a formal practice.
Oh, okay. So what do you see when you try to get into the product design role? Right? Is Superhand your first company?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenge you face? Because I assume what you learn in uni in your architecture courses are very different stuff. So when you start, your role in Superhands, let's say your first project, right? What are the challenges that you face when you're trying to do that?
Oh yeah, that was a tricky one. I think that was years ago. A few things that I shared with people, and like what Baim said, I mean, a lot of architecture students reached out to me asking like, okay, what would be the natural path to jump into UX? So what I shared with them is like, okay, forget what you know, but there are some things, and again, we're talking about like design thinking, like it remains the same. Like as you traverse through different, like in design field, it should remain the same. What I took from architecture into UX was that critical thinking, and also that basically that pessimistic view of things can go wrong.
Right.
And I think that was what I took over into UX. And the first few tasks was a bit challenging for me because there wasn't what I prepared for before starting the job was different than I guess the skill. I think Supans back then was like quite new. So the skill was
so actually you joined VLT Labs first, right? And then you became Super Hands, right?
No, I was hired. I guess you can call it like an internship or apprentice program,
Right.
but it wasn't like directly under VLT Labs.
Right,
I was
right.
working closely with the folks from VLT Labs,
Right.
but like then and there, I was already assigned to Super Hands.
For context, VLT Labs, I think it was acquired by McKinsey.
McKinsey, if I'm not mistaken, yeah.
So you were given a chance, because I think this is quite important, right? Like you don't have any experience, you don't have any formal education, but VLT Labs or Super Hands give you that chance to come in as their product designer.
Yep.
How do you convince them to do that? Because I assume like people who want to do this, like I don't even have any portfolio or what. Like, so what do you do to get that first, hiring?
It was tough, but I think I got lucky because UX was quite fresh at that time. Like it was established, but it wasn't like as established as it is right now.
What year is this, by the way? Like, for context.
2016, is it?
Not
2015,
that far,
2016. I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like it's still pretty new.
Yeah,
like I think companies were searching for some sort of designers, but they still don't know, like, is it gonna be like UX designer or is it gonna be
Graphic designer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I just like dove in headfirst into like just learning. Okay, how do you deliver like UX work and versus like UI work? And
No, maybe like do you have like a portfolios of stuff that you did on your own?
oh
before?
yeah.
How do you land the
I
first
think
job?
you land that
Yeah,
job.
I think
Yeah.
thanks to Izwan, so shout out to Izwan.
Right.
He was actually interested to hire more how do you say this,
Non-designers.
a bit of a generalist, I guess.
Right.
Like, and I came to him with some UX test projects, but the rest were more like, okay, what I did, like, for my graphic design, for publications, and all the other like installations, like physical design even.
Right.
So he was intrigued, like, okay, how can I kind of turn this like multifaceted designer, whatever, into UX? So that was my career defining.
So your work before your projects before already showcase your ability, like your taste in design, your design skills to a certain extent. I guess.
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's quite important, right? Like for those who want to get into this kind of role, what can they do as their own self-initiative projects to get hired as your first design role, right? Your product design role.
Is it fair to say you got it quite easy, like or lucky in that context?
Because of easy.
because right now I know it's very tough,
yeah.
right? For people to get into UX design, they have to have a very solid portfolio and whatnot. It's quite, I wouldn't say saturated, but kind of filled with a lot of talents out there.
I would say so myself. Like, yeah, like even moving to booking, like it's just me like counting my luck, right? But there's also that how you build connections before you jump into UX, that's important. And I get this a lot, like when people ask me like how do they apply for the first job, and I keep telling them, okay, try to aim for smaller companies or small startups, and try to gauge what the work is gonna be, what the project is gonna be, how that would actually improve you before you jump somewhere else. And as much as I hate test projects, I think that helped a lot. Yeah, that helped a lot. Just to give the interviewer a gauge of how you like generate ideas? How do you drive ideas?
Prove yourself.
Yeah. But ultimately, I think it's the interview that does most of the job of gauging your skill.
But at the same time, I don't want to discount his skills. Okay, I when I work with him, I know as a designer, he's very good at illustrations. Even I believe the person who actually taught me a bit of CSS, HTML, so he can do a lot of stuff. So booking is not purely luck. I think there's a mix of great talents there as well, lah.
Of course, yeah. Maybe I want to talk a bit about your experience at Super Hands, although it's just 1 year. What was your biggest or most interesting projects that you worked there? Because I remember the Super Hands product last time got a lot of like nice illustration, like you mentioned, like the branding is quite different than what other startups at the time. So we can share a bit like what kind of stuff you work on with ByAim or your own.
If you remember.
One project that I loved, and again I used that project to actually as part of my portfolio to apply for booking. The final project before I left the company, so I was tasked with like working on not just the illustrations, not just the branding, but also like the tone of the brand. But it was I think the last 3 months or 4 months where I had to kind of dive into front-end development.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had to do that from scratch. I remember that. Yeah. So illustration and how do you even prepare illustrations to put that into the web design. So I had to build that from scratch also, and I used that because if I remember correctly, Booking was looking for designer who can code.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that helped a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of joining a startup, right? Like you mentioned, your advice for people from architecture to join is to join smaller teams first, right? Because when you join these smaller startups, you don't really have a choice to just focus on UX design, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to do everything. You kind of have been forced to do this kind of stuff, but ultimately that really shaped us as a great product designer, right? Because you touch a lot of stuff. I remember we had a conversation on this as well. I think you told me last time about Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
You want to talk a bit more about it?
Yeah. I think that's an overly used saying. I guess by now, like maybe a couple of years back, people don't know. Like by now, people know that the full sentence of that is like Jack of all trades, right? Master of none, better than master of one, something like that, right? So, it goes hand in hand with the age-old question of like, should designers code? Should designers know AI? Should designers know this or that?
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's like you need to expand your domain. You need to protect your domain. You need to protect your relevance. So having more in-depth knowledge around like front-end development, like even back-end development, or now AI, it helps you to stay relevant. At the same time, like it establish like guardrails around your design. So yeah, like be jack of all trades all you can. Like you don't have to. It's more like a 80-20 kind of approach. Like you just need to know 20% to answer the 80% remaining of the question. So
it's like finding your niche, right? So it's like, how can you stand out among other? Let's say we talk about the whole hiring application. So how can you stand out from other applications when it comes to like job, right?
No, exactly.
So when you have that kind of niche, oh, this guy can do finance as well, or this guy can do illustration as well. So it give you a bit of edge compared to other candidates, right?
Imagine if you are a company, right? Would you pay the same amount, A or B? A can only do design, and B can do a lot of this stuff as well, but of course focus on design.
Yeah. I mean, that's a caveat though. Like we don't want to be miracle workers.
Yeah. But I guess like you say, it's kind of like provide a guardrail for or protect your domain, right? I really like that to really help you stand out as a designer.
Yep.
I would like to know, how did you land a job at Booking.com? How did that happen? Like 7 years ago.
Yeah. Pure luck. No. As I mentioned before, what they were looking for back then my set of skill fits their criteria, like almost 1-to-1. So they needed a designer who can actually push the changes, at least on the front end development side. And I had, I guess, a good enough basics around like front end development. So they were looking for something specific, someone specific, and like kind of wing it.
Did they reach out to you, or you found a job post?
So it was a funny story actually. So it was actually through a common friend, Hayat. He passed me the link. It was a job opening from Smashing Magazine website. So when I applied, I was convinced that it was based in London for some reason. Like, okay, yeah. So I submitted like my resume, my portfolio, and I got reached out by the recruiter. So the first round went like pretty well. And then he asked at the end, like, so do you know where this company is based? I was like, yeah, London. Like, no, it's Amsterdam. I was like, oh, okay, I don't know where it's based. Like, it was my first time like going to Europe for booking. Like after the first round, I think it was more like a fit interview. There were probably 3 different stages, remote interview sessions. So there were like live coding session. It was pretty nerve-wracking. Like
they actually test your coding skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a basic, I guess. It was more around, if I remember correctly, it was more around like CSS rules. Yeah, so bounding box versus border box, things like that. And then it was pretty nerve-wracking. Like back then, there wasn't Figma around, but there was this one website where you can see the cursors going around, and then it's like, I think it was like something like CodePen.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
but equivalent to a CodePen. So yeah, going through the remote sessions, and then I got a call a week after the last session, and they were basically saying like, okay, so we want to fly you over for the last 3 final sessions. So they gave me like a week to prepare, basically. So yeah, and then going through all the interview steps. And I thought I messed up the second one. It was the whiteboarding challenge. Yeah.
Oh.
And when you do it live back then, you kind of have to use the stage, right? So I was just like armed with A4 paper, and I did it there. And the interviewers were like looking at the whiteboard. Why is it empty? Yeah, I thought I screwed up that one, but yeah, ultimately all the interviewers actually agreed. Like, okay, this guy is like the perfect fit for what we're looking for back then. So yeah, I got the results on the same day.
Oh wow.
So
you were already planning to migrate at that point in your life, lah? Like you already looking for jobs outside of Malaysia, already planned to migrate? Or it just happened to
not at all.
Okay.
It was a impulsive decision. Okay. Like I applied for like other companies in our region. There's some in Singapore, there's a couple in Malaysia. That was like a shot in the dark, basically. Like, I didn't know they were looking for a specific designer, so I gave it a shot. But yeah.
Wow. So how's the experience of migrating to Amsterdam?
It was a lot. Yeah, it was a lot. Like, it was my first time in Europe ever. Even.
Ever?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like even being flown for the interview, I think it was probably 4 or 5 days that they gave me. So the second day was the interview day, but the rest I just like walked around. So it was pretty nerve-wracking, to be honest. Like, what is this? Like, why am I getting this? Like, I was honestly just happy being there, even though like if I get rejected, I'm like, I'm just gonna come home. Like, it was a happy moment. But yeah,
nice.
I can imagine that will be quite an interesting moment or exciting moment, right? Like moving into a new country.
It was pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Yeah. Alright, so let's talk about your experience at Booking. So we have like 7 years now, right, of experience. Booking, I think a lot of people probably know Booking, Agoda. It's all in the same parent company, right? And it's a very big platform for travel booking and all that. So how does it feel like working for a company or a product that is being used like by millions of people across the globe? Like how does it feel, right? Changing those kind of stuff on those platform.
It was surreal. Because I remember correctly, like at my first experiment, I caused an outage. Basically, I caused an outage. Yeah. So it was my first experiment, and it was I pushed it over the weekend, and then I let the experiment run. Yeah, it was a mistake, but that was the moment that I realized like I'm affecting millions.
Yeah.
Like on a daily basis.
Right.
So, I guess you can say it's a separate experience. Like for designers in startups, they have their pros and cons. So they're able to kind of touch the product development end to end. But for me or for designers working, I guess you can call it like corporate tech companies, they are able to get results instantly, right? Even though it's small iterations or whatever, like they are able to get those results instantly. So it was a new experience for me. Yeah, basically. I haven't really mentioned, like, I think during my days in Superhands, I didn't get to do UX at all. Yeah.
Mostly graphics.
Mostly that, and also web development. There was some UIs, yes, but UX, not so much. Like, I barely touch anything, basically. Yeah.
From what I know from this industry, right? I forgot, what is it called? OTA?
OTA, yeah.
OTA, right? What is it stands for?
Online travel agency.
Right?
Yeah.
So this OTA industries, right? I know they are very crazy in terms of A/B testing, experimentation, trying out different things, and designers are heavily involved in creating experiments, trying out different things. I had a friend in Agoda, Bangkok. He was telling me the same thing. Like they were like, experiment. My bonus will be tied to this A/B testing result. If I didn't, if I pull the number down, I'll be affected. So how do you balance that? Working with experimentation, A/B testing, smaller changes or bigger change on the website, and maintaining like a good experience for the visitors of the website.
Yeah, I think I know that friend in common. But anyway, so I used to be one of those designers who hated A/B tests because for me back then it was like it's deterring your progress. Like if you're launching something big, like there is no way that you can set up small increments changes to get the final result. Like I basically had a dilemma the first year. I was like, why am I doing this? Like this is such a small change. Like why am I looking at numbers? Like I'm not meant for like numbers and maths. But now I think balancing is it involves making peace with the fact that any of your changes is gonna be negative, and prepare yourself for. I actually look forward for postmortem after running experiments. Like, okay, if some experiments didn't go too well, that postmortem is what I look forward to. Okay. Like, okay, I need to know what other roles or what other designers actually think about. Like, okay, why do you think this is happening? So making peace with the fact that you will be proven wrong.
So you kind of expect things to go down a bit. I mean, to spiral negatively for a while. Yeah. And you want to learn from that and make another, experiment based on that. Is that how?
Exactly? And also, like, even if it doesn't go successful, it gives you enough ammunition to trigger research,
right?
More qualitative stuff.
Okay.
So it's not just quantitative. I think there were some misconceptions around like, being data-driven company, it's always like quantitative, but no, it's basically a means to an end, which is like, should we? So it's chicken and egg situation. Sometimes you only start designing an experiment after getting research insights. Sometimes, and I think most of the time, these experiments trigger more in-depth research.
Oh, okay.
So you need answers, like, yeah.
So maybe you can run us through a bit, like, let's say you have a new experiment or you want to test certain things on the UI, on the page, right? So what are the steps involved from you thinking of, the iteration until launching it and looking at the numbers from the A/B testing? We can just walk through.
No. I think the general theme of this podcast is going to be it's a case-by-case basis. So if you have like a big product launch, you cannot rely on small incremental changes, right? So there's another method for that. But yeah, I don't want to go too in detail into that. But generally, as a designer working in a data-driven company, you're expected to also already have at the back of your mind what kind of behavioral metrics do you want to use? Like what kind of business metrics you want to use? So every change that you push and that's where the being a pessimist comes into play. You need to already predict what can go wrong, and if whatever your perfect design change, like if it goes wrong, you need to already be able to answer like, okay, this goes wrong, so I need to see users' behavior around this area because I know that this was probably the main cause of that. So that's why now I feel like experiment gets me hyped up. Like running A/B tests, it's not so much about pushing that final product live, but it's more around
Learning,
uncovering things that you probably didn't like realize it before. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, it's like you propose this design, or like I think from brainstorm or from like even like product goals. You come up with this solution, you come up with this design, be it like a small or big scale changes, and then already you can think about, okay, what would be the happy path, what would be the sad path or negative path.
Yeah.
And for those negative paths, you can already attach what kind of behavior should I be able to see, right? Just to say like, okay, this negative path is actually happening. So that gives you enough reason to either put that feature live or trigger a whole business case for research. Like, is it gonna be like a full in-depth research or not?
Designers are responsible to come up with ideas of stuff to experiment with as well, as part of your role.
Yeah, and also the overall vision of the product area. Yeah.
So I assume you guys have your own internal tools to look at those A/B testing numbers, like variant A, variant B, and you will look at those and present data to the business, or how does it work after the launch?
Yeah, I think sometimes that's the good part of it. Like, it doesn't have to be a specific role looking into the post analysis. Like, it can even be a developer. It can even be like the engineers themselves. Like, they have a hypothesis they want to test. They just check it with the team and then they implement the change, and then they'll look at the numbers themselves. So having everyone in the team on board and understand what this metric does, what that metric does, it helps create that synergy. Like, okay, even if I'm stuck at iteration, I know that, okay, my engineers is gonna come up and say like, hey, we can try this one according to this. I think it's because of this. So yeah, having that understanding is pretty good.
Last question about A/B testing. Yeah. What is the smallest change you have done that contributes to the biggest improvement in terms of numbers?
Man. I would say the running joke of small iterations or A/B testing is how you move things just a couple of pixels down or a couple of pixels up. That was actually my first few successful experiments.
Really?
Yeah. Just moving things a couple of pixels down, or putting like drop shadow, or God forbid, but yeah, like having those kind of minor change, it helps you understand like, okay, what are you failing to see? Like, even it's just a couple of pixels down or up, like it doesn't make sense. But then the numbers give you a better view. Okay, it's because it's a couple of pixels down. It doesn't maybe block the search bar. It doesn't block this. It doesn't block the keyboard. So those questions didn't exist before you start experiments. So yeah, I think the first few months I was in booking, it was basically those small incremental changes. Like, I have a hypothesis. I want to test this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just move stuff around and see.
Yeah, just to be safe, because I don't want to break the product. So it was eye-opening.
Right.
To be honest. Yeah.
I remember last time I did ask him where in booking pages, right? When they will show how many people are booking right now.
Yeah.
And then I asked him, and hey,
is it real or not?
Is it real or fake? Because I feel like a lot of people saying like it is Uiux lah.
Yeah.
It's
Agency.
not actual numbers. Yeah.
Is it real?
That's a tricky one. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here, but it's real. It's real. And I can go into detail just a bit, just to touch on that. Like, we used to have a lot more of those. Right? And those are based on real numbers. we wanted to kind of remove that because of that whole impression that this is just stressing us out, stressing the users out. But actually, and this goes hand in hand with the whole global approach, right? It works in like East Asian countries,
Right.
Southeast Asian countries. It's because we are highly contextual.
Yeah.
And having those numbers, prompts, nudges, whatever you want to call it, it helps just to I'll give you a simple one. So if you look at not booking.com, some of the products, and then you go at the checkout, and then it says something like, oh, only 2 left in this whatever. That helps you plan your steps, your next steps, especially like, talking about travel, about trips. It helps you plan, okay, there's only a couple of units left, so I need to plan my days better. I just need to lock it down in the next few days. I cannot wait until next week. So that we've actually done like some research, and it's helpful, even though it's questionable.
So you push people to convert faster, right? 'Cause you have that kind of urgency to push them, or
on one hand, there's that. There's also the other hand, which is to give more context for users.
Whether
Like,
it's like
in order for them to see, oh, is this hotel or is this property
popular.
popular, or is it a hot choice option for that particular destination, or is the generally is the destination a hot destination? Yeah. So if there's an event and then you see everything blinking red, then you know something's happening. Yeah.
So those things are proven to be useful for, I mean, at least from the business point of view, like it helps to get those numbers. But maybe hot take, right? I don't know hot take or not. But if you look at, let's say, Airbnb, right?
Yep.
They don't do that. Do you know why they don't implement those kind of patterns? Or is that something that is different in terms of the user behavior at Airbnb versus other OTAs?
I mean, just to give more context for apple to apple comparison, right? Airbnb is a single unit inventory.
Inventory.
It's not a group of hotels. It's not like one. Basically, like one property owner doesn't have like multiple rooms.
Okay.
So imagine going to Airbnb and everything says like there's only one unit left.
Yeah, because
technically it's just one unit.
Okay.
So for a fair comparison, and I actually wanted to touch upon this maybe sometime later, because we're designing for a global scale, global market, and I mentioned this just now. For Asian market, having high context works better.
Because they want to know more.
Yeah, gone are the days of like very ample white space. Yeah. And we've seen actually a couple of apps and brands fail to tap into our market because they go with that kind of design. They don't try to understand, why is I don't know, like Shopee app is like super cluttered. There's a lot of information, but that's how we users in our region look at app. We want to see everything and want to have a choice to see everything from the get go. So that's why like it's a bit hard to compare between.
So this is like the whole
like the
Chinese,
Japanese,
versus,
Chinese,
exactly.
So there's a very interesting video. I forgot the YouTube channel that she compare all these different kind of apps, like super app from China, super app from US. So like you said, like I want to open the app, I want to see a lot of things at once to know that I have a lot of choices. No, I don't really care about white space, right?
Yeah,
so that's
rather
interesting.
than hiding those features inside multiple screens, right?
So that kind of pattern works well for like let's say for Asian markets. So I guess it makes sense for business to push for that kind of patterns, right?
I mean, with some moderation, of course. Like
it's
not as cluttered, but that's the global approach, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
The Japanese one is like ultra cluttered, lah. I don't know how is that good, lah.
No, I mean, I have bone to pick every time I come back to Malaysia. Like I have bone to pick, like looking at the Malaysian app. Like every time I come back, it's like, oh man, it's such a different experience like compared to like over there. But like you get reminded, like no, it works in our context. Like in our context, we have daily routine is different. Like we want to see all this information up front. We want to be able to select what we want to read. So it just show me everything. As compared to, I don't know, the Western app, a product. They're more around like, okay, we're just gonna present the basic information of how the product works, and then if you have questions, you can like browse
figure it
around.
out.
Yeah, you figure it out. So that's a low context. So low versus high context is pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah. I also saw a post comparison about multiple super apps, right, in Malaysia. They were saying that all the banking apps look kind of similar in a way. We all
I
have
saw that
multiple
post.
styles at the top. And then he was saying like, oh, what's happening to our design lah? Like, why is everything looking the same, right? But I think it's quite interesting to talk about, right? Because at some point we want to have maintain the common design because it's about familiar.
This is something around familiarity versus novelty. Like I think better to design for something that is people familiar with. If it's not, there's no need to make it too different. But if you have your own unique products, then of course it's a bit different. Yeah, but you don't want users to have to learn whenever they switch. They don't have time to learn.
Exactly. Like just work on the established pattern. The market.
There's already an established pattern that works. There's no harm.
I wonder in Europe, do they have those kind of pattern like with multiple tiles or not, like super app?
I think Uber is going that way, right? With all the tiles.
Uber is going that way because they do food delivery as well, so they need to cater for that. But even that, it's quite simple. Like if you compare it with can I name drop? to Grab, for example, it's still quite light. It's still quite lean over there. Yeah. But it creates a problem for me as an Asian. It's like, okay, I need to know. I need to know from the get go, from the index, the landing page. I need to be able to select what type of food I want. Like, I don't want to be asked like, okay, are you taking a ride, or are you taking like? I need to be able to already see everything in place before I start. Yeah. So yes and no. You do see a couple of apps trying to establish that same Asian pattern. But generally it's not really a thing. Like for them, it's like straightforward, as clean as possible, as lean as possible, and then you push users into the deeper end. Yeah.
Okay, I want to touch a bit about data and insights, right? Were there any interesting behavior that you uncover while doing testing or A/B testing or user testing at Booking?
I recall this one research that we did. Basically, we wanted to try to understand if users actually search for something on our product with just like one keyword, or are they gonna type a sentence? And then we did a study around basically looking at the query logs, like how much do users actually type in when searching for something. Good amount of users actually typing more than 3 tokens, for example. Like they were searching for more. They were searching for like a full-blown sentence. So we were convinced like, oh, okay, this is happening. This is good. Like, okay, they're thinking of searching, I guess, in a more natural way.
Can you give an example? What do you mean?
What kind of keywords in that sentence?
Oh, so I'll get to that.
Okay.
So we thought, just looking at numbers, again, this is qualitative versus quantitative, right? So just looking at the numbers, we were convinced like, okay, users are actually doing this, right? Almost came up with like ideations around that discovery. And then I had an instinct to look into the actual log and started seeing pattern like, oh, okay. It looks weird that they're typing like something that sounds like a hotel name, something that sounds like an address. So I asked like my engineer, okay, can you look at the latency from one letter to the actual full-blown sentence? Can you look at the latency, like how many seconds? So it turns out users actually copy pasting flows. So it was a close call of basically diving and jumping into like a full-blown research. And then that instinct kicked in. Like, okay, there's something wrong with this. Like, it does sound natural, but it's quite fast. So looking at the actual numbers, is like it gave us a whole different direction. Like, oh, okay, users actually come to our product to copy paste. Maybe something that they got from a friend or something like that. So that was quite interesting an interesting discovery for me.
I do that a lot. So copy paste the entire hotel
Exactly.
name,
Yeah.
area name.
Because you don't want to get the wrong hotel, right? You want to get a specific one. Interesting.
Okay. So you're saying that if you didn't ask for that latency thing, you probably go into like a natural language search bar kind of thing, is it?
Yeah, and then discover pretty late. But I think that's generally why you need to balance and why you need to understand when should quantitative take over qualitative or vice versa, right? So yeah.
Wow. Luckily you guys have that latency numbers.
Yeah. It's very detailed actually, latency number.
Just now we talk a bit about, designing for different region, different culture and all that, right? I assume you guys have, all this repository of user behavior for different region, all that. Anything you want to, summarize? Like, let's say for East Asian, just now we talk about Asian market, right? We want to see everything, contextual, all that. How about Europe? Like, because we know a lot of startups from US, their design style is pretty much, well known, right? How about Europe? Like all those in between, what are the standard ways of those design?
I think European market are divided also. The south of Europe behaves differently than Central Europe,
Oh, okay.
right? And Eastern Europe is
Totally
a bit
different way.
closer to like
Asia.
the Asia way of And I'll do one better. Like in order for you to understand how different markets work, in order for you to come up with solutions that is a bit more global, you need to understand how cultures work, right? And I've recommended this book again and again to different people. It's called The Culture Map by
Culture
Aaron
Map.
Mayer. Like if you haven't read that, like just go through and then you start to understand different spectrums as you move throughout the map, right? That itself provides you with enough context. And like I said just now, like high context versus low context. Like for us, East Asians, Southeast Asians, we thrive on high context. Like everything needs to be there in order for you to even understand what's going on. So that was discussed a bit in the book, right? And then sometimes it's not always the same pattern, like high versus low. Sometimes it flips.
Oh.
Yeah. In different situations, it flips.
Oh, okay.
So you need to understand when
When to use high context. when to
Exactly,
use- oh, okay.
exactly. So basically, you come up with the middle ground, and then if this is more severe in different cultures, you need to kind of lean towards that rather than the other one.
Do you guys have a different UI for different region?
No, not quite. Different contents maybe. Yeah.
But the booking group have, let's say, Agoda is primarily focusing on South region, Asia region, right? Like Booking.com is Europe. Is that how you structure?
I guess more focus areas, yes. Focus market, yes. But it generally works global.
But a lot of Malaysians use Booking, right? You not go.
Yeah, but I think I because I've did some reading about this a while back. Like the market, like you said, right? That's the Agoda. That's why their HQ is in Bangkok. So the focus is more on the Southeast Asian region, and then Booking is more on that side. But of course, it can be used anywhere. So just, can you repeat the name of the book again? The journey.
The Culture Map by Aaron Mayer.
Aaron Mayer.
Yeah.
Is that specific to design or
No,
just
it's
culture in general?
culture, communication. Yeah, I mean there are a lot of other points being discussed, but what's helpful in the book is like she mapped it in the spectrum for every topic that she discussed, so you know that it's not always the same pattern. It's not always like high context for Asia, low context for Western. No, sometimes it flips. So yeah.
I remember reading about even icons. For icon to use might be different for different region, right? Because they understand things differently. That's probably another area where designers have to think about. Especially being from Asia, you go to, let's say, Europe, you use an icon that probably more being used in Asia. Gonna be like, what's this? Yeah, probably something to also be aware of.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything? Let's say, let me talk about the culture thing as well. Is there anything is common across all cultures that's shared everywhere?
I'm just talking about like e-commerce experience, right? So this is generally the common pattern. During so that's a term for it, like the quarantine phase.
Okay.
Yeah, basically you try to lock users in from the checkout process so that they don't have to kind of go back and forth. So the experience there remains pretty much the same.
Okay.
Right? No one wants to be bombarded with cross-sell stuff. No one wants to be. It's that point, every user in different region needs clarity and they need like reassurance.
Confirmation of what date,
Exactly.
where.
Yeah. So to review the order or to look into what are the clear next steps.
Right.
So that was I think that still is the common pattern.
Right. So across region, across culture, that is pretty much expected.
Yeah. Unless I'm leaving out some other cultures that I don't know of, maybe.
But based on your observation.
Yeah. Like generally all products work that way. Yeah, you can see the same pattern during checkout because
People are in that anxiety phase. I'm gonna
exactly.
make a payment,
You don't want them to kind of change their mind too much, or you don't want them to kind of scour through the journey.
Okay, Syith, I want to touch a bit about the future of travel design. How do you imagine travel design can implement AI and VR or utilize it in the future?
Oh, there's endless possibilities actually. So now that we're moving into AI, so there's I guess like you guys know there are different parts of AI. Like when we dive into AI topic, like what does it mean? Now what's in trend is the generative AI, right? So for users, for travelers' point of view, the segment of the market that we can target using like AI or the future any future features is the browsing part. It's the inspiring part. That's the part that I think in all travel products they lack a bit. Right? They have the product, but they don't have ways to kind of intrigue users to look for destinations. So we can see, I think post COVID, the travel drive is much higher now, but they're looking for, I guess, the less beaten path. They're looking for something somewhere exotic. But there's not enough. There's a lot of contents, but it's not connected to the actual product selling, the inventory. So inspirational part of travel is what I think, and this is just my take. AI can actually help further to shape the traveling intent, to shape, like to inspire them. Like, okay, it'll get to a point where you would just tell whatever, like your assistant, I want to go somewhere that fits my persona. I want to go somewhere with my friend. And then that assistant or that AI feature is able to then interpret, like, okay, your friend, meaning like the one you've traveled before.
What do they like?
What do they like? And then you can already like connect that to an end-to-end product. So like, okay, itinerary this way, this the next product is going to be this. How do you want to travel? That's already happening. And it's not even from apps, e-commerce apps. There's a bunch of travel itinerary app that utilizes AI. Yeah. So that's a promising horizon to look into next. Right?
That'll be interesting, actually. Yeah. So that the app can generate an interesting itinerary that for all the participants to enjoy, essentially, right? Maybe someone prefer a more Japanese vibe. Person B prefer more like a Western vibe. Maybe they can find a middle ground that both can enjoy.
Exactly. And I think what's important, and I think it's not because of AI, but I think in recent years we start moving away from doing personalization based on a single user basis. Nowadays we now understand, and with the advance of AI, we are able to understand further that a single person can have multiple personas. Especially when talking about travel, like how I traveled last year is not going to be the same how I travel this year. Like if I travel during, I don't know, in winter season, it's not going to be the same as me traveling during summertime. Or it's not even going to be the same if I'm traveling with like my partner or my parents. So the makeup of that persona changes over time. So now it's a bit more contextualization versus personalization, and AI helps to kind of bridge that gap. They can predict like, okay, this person is gonna travel next season, which is something that they've done before in winter time. So the makeup is gonna be this way rather than what they used to. So that's also promising.
Very exciting time.
Okay, so we touched quite a lot on the A/B testing part, right? But maybe we can also talk about the research aspect, right? So is there anything you can share that booking or like other like Agoda and all that? Like how do research play a part, and how does it different than let's say other kind of products? What are unique to travel related products when it comes to research?
What I can share, I think this is, I guess, generally the common pattern around like OTAs. Users have different phases when they browse the product. So simply targeting the behavior when they are in the browsing phase and try to apply that to the actual bookings phase is gonna be a disaster. Like, we know, and this is where contextualization come in. We know that they have different phases, and sometimes the first time around that they open the app or look for something, it'll probably take them months before they actually commit, right? Especially if it's like a multi-legged trip, or if it's like a I don't know, non-domestic travel. You know that you need to have different understanding of the phases involved. So it's not ironically it's not a high turnover design. But in terms of research, that's what I think all the travel agencies OTA do. They try to break the same user into different phases and what kind of content would be relevant to them at which point.
You guys do a lot more interviews or usability testing, or which methods are usually being applied when it comes to building new features or iteration?
So I think that that's quite a lot. We used to do I think it's called like ethnographic research, where you actually go to the users
you see how they
basically to catch them in their most comfortable zone and then try to ask questions from there. We used to do that. We have labs, so lab interviews. We have like test research, like user testing. I mean, they're again common theme, case by case basis. But what we discovered, and going to the previous question, even if you optimize for conversion, you design something that optimizes like users converting, you cannot have the accurate insights when you do that over user testing. It's not gonna be the accurate
representation.
It's not. They're not gonna be in the same mind space where basically like they don't have that commitment. So it's really hard to say it's gonna work based on research unless you make them commit then and there. Which is why ethnographic is a good method. Still, it's not as accurate.
How does that work with the global users, man?
Travel lah. You
have to go, let's say, to Bangkok, and
I mean that like I said, like the methods vary. There are also methods, and I think not sure if Booking does it, but other OTAs might do it also. So it's more like shadowing. It's a bit intrusive. But I guess there's a lot more boundaries being established between the user and like, okay, I'm gonna shadow you. That's also I think it's called dog fooding or something. So you put yourself as a user. You try to book something, or you try to go to a destination that doesn't really speak out to your persona, and then you try to jot down and log every step of the way until you get there. So different methods, right? Like it's hard. Like I think we're still trying to figure out like, okay, the mindset the users are in when they're actually booking versus test. It's way different.
Because it actually involves like scheduling your time for future, making payment and all that, right? So you really want to be careful Not making the
Yeah.
wrong booking. Yeah.
I think initially I wanted to ask about that as well. How do you or like booking team design based on customer feelings, right? Because let's say, for example, like you mentioned earlier, there are multiple phases, right? Maybe in the first phase, when they go to a page, they just initially wanted to find a place to book for. But once they done the paying part and whatnot, step 2, step 3, and now they actually went to that place and they have all this anxiety with how to book in once I got there, how to get there, this kind of stuff lah. So I find that very interesting. Okay, Syith. An audience of the Design Thinking Club was suggesting to us, our guests, about what do they understand about design thinking. Maybe you can enlighten us. I know this is a very scary topic for most of us to answer, but I think it's okay. Maybe you can just share based on your experience or what you understand.
Oof. 7 years, 7 plus 2 years in this industry. I can safely say I cannot explain what design thinking is. It differs from person to person. I mean, there are methodologies, there are flows to help you unblock in coming to that final decision. But it differs from person to person. Like some people, they might thrive doing UI audit, like in a UI inventory audit. Some people might actually thrive with that as design thinking. Some people might, use the basic methods of framework. Some people might actually have to kind of patch two different methods together. So it's really hard. Like design thinking ultimately is how you understand your tools, how you understand the different frameworks that you can utilize to solve the problem your way. So having critical thinking, that's part of design thinking for me. Like just having that high level skill before you dive into like, okay, what methodologies should I use? That's secondary. Like, the first part of design thinking is understanding the problem and how you want the output to be. And I start basically like playing Lego, like, okay, which method can I use to get things from other people, from other stakeholders? So, yeah, it's a bit generic, but yeah, design thinking for me is more, how do you solve a problem by just understanding what different tools mean to you?
Yeah, what's available to you as well.
Exactly.
Not everyone have those things, right?
You mentioned earlier that even during your architecture studies, right, you learn a bit about design thinking. You want to share a bit about on that?
It's well, I can probably mention like which of commonalities between architecture and UX. It's that as I mentioned before, it's that high level of criticality, that pessimistic view, And don't quote me on this because I think it's arguably a bad trait to have as a designer. Like you need to have this blue sky approach, but as you work with a more matured product, you need to have that criticality. Like you need to understand how things go wrong, and that's something that I picked out from architecture. Like basically having this happy flow in mind, but also anticipating how things can actually go wrong. So that's kind of a design thinking. Yeah, debatable, but yeah.
I think there's also a similarity between architecture and UX design, for example, where both of these discipline are involving customer. Both of these discipline involves customer or actually designing something for the customer. Maybe for architecture, you want to make sure that the user, how can I go to the toilet easily, or how can I cook food easily, right? I believe these are also considered when you are designing a building.
Designing a space, right?
Designing a space. And I think that's one thing that I can point out, the similarity that where design thinking can be implemented.
But I would argue also like UX is, again, cliche, UX is everywhere. When you're designing for traffic, for example.
Yeah.
You need to understand, like, okay, how the regular behaviors of the road users are in this particular area before you start, implementing. Okay, there needs to be traffic lights here. There needs to be, I guess, a junction over here, roundabout over here. Like, you need to understand the user behavior.
Yeah.
Same as like wayfinding at the airport, crowd control. You need to understand, okay, what's the common search of crowd, for example. You need to understand the time frame, which kind of sounds similar to what we do in the product design anyway.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to take a break a bit. I want to talk a bit more on advice and fun stuff. What advice could you give to designers entering the travel tech space?
That's very specific, travel tech space. Try not to drop what you know before. Doesn't matter what field you were before jumping into. And this is a general advice before jumping into tech. Right? There's always something that you can use when jumping into tech. There's always something that you're actually really good at before. It's just that you don't know how to translate that into digital design. So try to tap into that energy and go crazy.
Yeah. You don't have to reset, right? You can still take advantage of what you've learned before or what you've tried before and do it in this kind of practices as well.
Exactly. Like even if it involves like doing Excel, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be resourceful, of course. Just don't let go of whatever you've learned before.
Okay, since you've been working for Booking for 7 years now, I'm just curious, right? How did that change your travel behavior? Was it any different now? Since now
You get to travel a lot because of Booking.
Yeah.
Is there like particular or certain things you look at differently now now that you're designing that?
Yeah. I think same goes with every other product. But like you tend to be a bit more alert in the components of your trip, and you tend to, see if there are any takeaways that I can implement back to the product. Yeah, especially like just looking into different components of the product, like how tiring it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just calling out, like, traveling to Japan is next level. Right? You need to understand how to connect from point A to B already months before you go there. So having that kind of alertness, you get to experience that as a user, but at the same time you learn that, okay, you need to be kind of aware when to plan which leg of your trip you're currently in. You get a bit more alert because like, okay, you've been designing for this, you've been hypothesizing, but when you are in their shoes, things start to go wrong. And then you come back and then you take that takeaway and then you try to hypothesize again and again.
It's pretty interesting, right? Because until you actually experience the real pain points of the users, there's not much you can assume, right? Especially for these kind of products where the frequency is not that high. Like you probably travel like a few times a year or even once a year. So even for you as a designer, when you're designing it, you cannot really experience it until you actually go travel, like a real travel, instead of just testing it on those staging app and all that. So then only you can experience the real pain points that you can bring back to improve your product.
Yeah, I guess it's a blessing to be able to test your own product. Sometimes you design something in the back end and then you have no idea how to test it or never use.
Using your own product as a designer is very important. I would say.
Yeah.
It's a blessing, I would say. Like, not everyone have access to that, right?
Yeah, like especially if you're a product designer in a company that has no use to you.
B2B stuff, for example. Right?
Exactly. But not to say that,
No, I mean, you can still talk to the users and all that, but experiencing it yourself
can be totally different.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, like for Settle, for example, right? We queue every other week or every week. For me, it's like I always found problems that I can always come back to the team. It's like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. Because you experience it every other day, every other week. So that helps to also be in the, it's like you are in the shoes of the users all the time.
This reminds me about running internal family joke of mine, of my dad. So my dad is an engineer. So whenever we go out at a restaurant or what, and everyone is sitting at the table, and my dad is like knocking on the door, knocking on the walls, like.
This is what I thought. This is about architecture or
You see, and you'll know architecture students when they go to
touch
wall
it.
and touch it, like, okay, the texture is nice.
Okay, let's go to rapid fire question.
Yeah, so basically, we're just gonna say 1 or 2 words, and we just need you to quickly say what you have in mind without any contact.
Oh damn. Okay.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot of senses.
Okay, infinite scrolling.
Contextual.
Designers who can code.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. User persona.
Slightly overrated.
Whoa.
Subscribe dulu kan. Okay, skeuomorphism.
Oi. That never ends.
Never ends.
Yeah.
You like it or not? Middle.
Skewer or neo skewer?
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, what's new skew?
That's neo skeuomorphism.
It's like a.
It's like new.
Yeah. Not too physical looking, but it's like something
In the middle.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly, I think you answered this. Like, requiring data for every design decision.
Oh. Data driven, intuition driven, or in between.
Oh, that's a hard one. I would say do it if you have the means. Yeah.
Okay, Syith, you've been working in Amsterdam for 7 years now, and you migrated to Europe, right, from Malaysia. What was the most valuable thing you learned?
I guess I would say I just want to point out the working in a multinational environment that's based in Central Europe. What I've learned a lot is, and I think both of you knew who I was before. Like I was a bit timid. Like I don't want to mingle with other designers. And even in a work setting, I tend to kind of reserve my comment. So that's the Asia part of us. But yeah, working there with like multi-nationals helps me to have that balance. Not to completely discard my Asian traits, which is reading the room. And again, go back to that book. So Asian have this really good skill of reading the room. So they don't tend to jump into every conversation. They'll just read the room, basically test the temperature before they come up with like the final argument. But yeah, working there helps me to kind of balance it out.
Right.
Not to wait until the last moment where it's too late, but also try to not be too blunt.
Right.
So yeah, that's one of the most valuable thing that I can basically recommend to all other designers. Try to balance that approach.
This has been a recurring theme, a comparison between Asian designers and people in Europe or in the West, right? Asian tend to be keep it to themselves and don't
More
speak up
reserved,
as much. Yeah, more reserved.
And that
It can be both good and bad, I guess, for
Yeah,
at least for
exactly.
work settings. Yeah. We don't want to be those reserved all the time where you don't say anything.
that can also be applied in your design, right?
Yeah.
Being an Asian designer, especially when you're doing like user research, you tend to be a bit more accommodating, right? So you don't catch that rawest input. You tend to like not put them in a awkward position, try to be friendly. I've the first research that I was part of in booking, she's a Polish researcher, so very straightforward, very blunt. It was a culture shock. She was like basically just grilling the user. I was like, okay, whoa, this is not gonna fly. Like if it was in our region, it's not gonna fly. Like the user might actually just walk out.
Yeah.
But because of that, like we were able to get like the rawest. We were able to kind of catch them off guard a lot earlier, and the input that we get is really, really super raw. And then you can get basically the most accurate representation of how users use your product. So yeah,
This is also interesting. Like, if you are a researcher working for a global audience kind of product, let's say you fly to another country to do a research, you have to tweak your approach already.
exactly.
She cannot come to this Asia region and try to do the same thing, right? Because she need to probably know as well what to do, what cannot be done.
Yeah.
There's another area to that we never talk about as well.
Take note, guys.
Last question, I guess. Would you recommend Malaysian designer pursuing like migrating to another country in the first few years of their career?
No.
Now, I think I would say like now the design community in Malaysia is a lot more mature. Like there's already more than enough for designers to basically just establish their base over here and try to kind of learn from like different designers. There are still other designers that we don't know of from outside of our circles that are actually pretty
Doing very well.
doing very well. And like just moving there, the first Malaysian that I met, like he's a designer, he's still a designer over there. So he belongs to, I guess, a circle outside of our circle. But then turns out like, okay, they have their own ways of designing. So I would say yes. No. Like you don't have to.
Yeah.
But in order for you to make more mature and more holistic experience in the product, if you have a chance, sure, go for it. Like it'll open your eyes in other areas that you probably won't get from just designing here locally. But yeah, like I said, we have more than enough over here. New designer or old designer, like if you have the chance, sure.
Yeah, old designer. Yeah. Okay. So we see a lot of people moving or migrating from Singapore, for example, right? Because there's a lot more companies over there. I guess more interesting kind of a product to work on. But you were saying that we have enough here. We don't have to really go out, or maybe just if they have an opportunity, that you should take it at least for the early part of your career to learn more before you come back, I guess.
Kind of, but I guess you need to also consider what's your end goal. If you want to come back to this region, basically contribute, then go for the sake of like getting insights before you can apply it here, which was why I mentioned like we have more than enough, right? So basically contributing to our region, the way and coming up with like the design thinking based on how we do things over here. You don't need to go outside as much. And I guess moving to Singapore is basically same region, right? Yeah. But if you're planning to kind of broaden your horizon and work on more global product, I think nowadays it's hard to call something a global product. Every product is a global product. But even if your final goal is to be elsewhere, to have a more Western approach to design, I mean, sure, go for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Other than all the stuff that we talk about just now, is there any other advices that you want to share with our listeners?
The one thing that I keep sharing with again new designers: stop being obsessed with tools. Stop being obsessed with tools. And that's, to quote again what I said about like design thinking, is understanding there are tools to solve your problem, but you don't have to be obsessed about the tool. You just need to know
tools, right?
Exactly. Like even if it's a software or a coding language that you still don't know about, knowing what it does, it's more than enough. If you need to jump in, go for it. Yeah, that gives you that flexibility. So in order, I think when you do have to use that tool, you'll hit the ground running, because you know, I want this to solve my problem, rather than I want to know what this can do to help me understand my problem, which is insane. Yeah.
Cool.
Well said.
Alright, I think that's it for our fourth episode. I think one thing that I really appreciate from the conversation that we have today is about the culture part, right? Like where you have to be in tune of what high context, low context for each culture. I think that book is pretty interesting. We're gonna probably look at that. And the idea of data driven design with booking is probably the very very data driven, because designers are doing all the A/B testing and all that on top of the research. I think those are pretty interesting to learn about. Anything else, Baim?
Yeah, I think it's also very interesting to hear different parts about the comparison between designing in Europe and designing in Malaysia. I think a lot of takeaways there that I would implement, and I think most of us can implement as well. Speaking up more, especially to me, as a big takeaway as well, because a lot of local designers are very shy, but that's limiting you, man.
Yeah.
So you have to speak up and try to involve more, I guess. So yeah, thank you so much, Syith. It was a pleasure to have you on board.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think maybe next time we can come again to the channel.
We're gonna need like months in advance.
All right. Thank you, guys. Don't forget to subscribe.
Right.
Bye.